Argentina. For most people, this is Diego Maradona, tango and gauchos. South American joie de vivre, combined with a portion of madness that makes the people of South America's second largest country so endearing, finds its expression in tango here on the streets of Camiento. For many of the internationally renowned tango dancers, Camiento constituted the beginning of their careers. Hardened by the toughest tango audience in the world. The street of the tango is located in the center of Boca, the oldest district in the Argentine capital. It has become world famous due to the Boca Juniors football stadium. Countless bars and restaurants provide live music and tango. Of course, this attracts tourists. But at the tables, Spanish is spoken, and the performances of the artists and dancers are critically reviewed and commented upon. On the football fields around the stadium, youngsters often play for several hours per day. All of them are united in the hope of being discovered by a talent scout from one of the big clubs. Ordinarily, their hopes are in vain. But examples of well-known street footballers that have tried their luck in Europe fuel the dream of wealth and recognition. For most, football remains an escape from the reality of everyday life, which as a rule means unemployment. Because here, as in most countries of South America applies, the majority has hardly enough to survive. But life goes on nevertheless. Most people have 2 or 3 jobs. This is the only way to survive the Argentine capital. But one thing unites the people in the districts of Buenos Aires: their unbending optimism and love for tango and football. Ever since Madonna and her film Evita set a Hollywood-style monument for the former wife of the president of Argentina, the name Evita now also belongs to the icons of the South American state. This is the other side of Argentina, Patagonia, the land of endless vastness, solitude, and the big nothing. This is how Charles Darwin saw it when he journeyed through Patagonia and developed essential components of his theory of evolution here. We proceed in search of clues in Patagonia and follow in the footsteps of Charles Darwin in the land of infinite vastness. Our journey takes us from Buenos Aires south along the coast to Trelew in the province of Chubut. Located there is the largest and most important paleontological museum in Argentina. This is the perfect place from which to begin our journey in the footsteps of Charles Darwin. It was researchers from Trelew that discovered and excavated the skeleton of the largest ever dinosaur, the so-called Dinosaurus argentinus, followed by further excavations. This is why paleontologists consider the province of Chubut to be the cemetery of dinosaurs. Skeletons, or dino parts, are found here during construction work on an almost weekly basis. In painstakingly detailed work shifts, the fossilized finds are removed from the soil and then preserved, catalogued, and stored in the museum. To do this, scientific staff members of the museum take impressions of the bones and produce original replications of the dinosaur skeletons. In this way, a huge puzzle is created, which eventually becomes a full-size, one-to-one replica of a dinosaur skeleton. Thus, breakthrough knowledge regarding the habitat and extinction of the greatest dinosaurs ever to walk on Earth could be obtained. When based loosely on Darwin, dinosaurs wouldn't have been able to survive, as their adaptation to the new living conditions didn't work. In their day, dinosaurs were the largest living creatures and were unable to adapt fast enough to the new circumstances. They couldn't find enough to eat and became extinct. Their skeletons were preserved and fossilized during the course of several million years. Today, they bear witness to a time which has had a lasting effect, right up until the present day, a time characterized by ice ages and climate change. We continue our journey along the coast toward the south. Below the equator, spring has just begun. Our destination is the Valdez Peninsula. The Valdez Peninsula is one of 28 nature reserves in Argentina. With its 3,625 square kilometers, it is more than double the size of London and was declared a World Heritage Site by the UNESCO in 1999. The peninsula is of particular importance because of the marine mammals that cavort around its shores and in the waters off the island. Elephant seals and whales give birth to their young here and rear them in close proximity to the coast. The elephant seal colony in Punta Delgada, in the north of the Valdez Peninsula, is one of the few retreats of these huge animals. It is also the only elephant seal colony on the coasts of South America. On the beach of El Arenal, some 20 kilometers away from Punta Delgada, we encounter the first colony of the huge marine mammals. Protected by a high sand dune, the animals lie in groups on the beach and doze. The pups are simple to spot because of their dark skin. They are already weaned from their mothers, but don't really want to accept the fact that the milk bar is closed, and that life comprising sleeping and eating now begins in earnest. The world's largest seals were given their name after the enlarged trunk-like nose of the bulls. Thanks to strict conservation, global elephant seal stocks have now grown to a total of some 750,000. The bulls can reach lengths of 6.5 meters and have an average weight of around 3.5 tons. The cows are much smaller, at roughly 3.5 meters and weighing in at around just 900 kilos. The colossi of the seas, should you be able to see them, lazily spend most of their time ashore sleeping in the sun. This saves energy. We leave the north coast of the Valdez Peninsula and head inland in a southerly direction, whereby we encounter the Pampas for the very first time. At this time of year, the Pampas is green, but the rich color cannot disguise the inhospitable nature of this barren landscape. Patagonia is 3 times the size of the United Kingdom, and it shows endless meadows and the ubiquitous plains comprising low-growing trees and hard-leaved bushes stretch as far as the eye can see. On average, 2 people per square kilometre live in Patagonia, compared to Britain's 246. It is quite normal to travel for miles without encountering a single human being. Patagonia means solitude, alone with itself and with nature. Otherwise, we experience for the first time that which Charles Darwin describes in his travel documents as the big nothing, and it gnaws at both body and soul. It is hot in the interior of the peninsula. In the early summer, temperatures rise quickly to around 30 degrees. The omnipresent wind dries out the rivers. Here, nature has demanded her right and eliminates mercilessly. Charles Darwin also observed this 150 years ago. And here in the Pampas, this holds sway now as it did then, irrespective of whether man or animal. Only the strongest survive, those best adapted to nature. The rest have no chance. Back to the coast of the Valdez Peninsula, this time in the south. Huge sand dunes form the coast of the Golfo Nuevo. Reminiscent of a mountain landscape, the formations stretch to the shore. In part, wind and weather have created cubistic structures, which make it worthwhile spending a moment or two here. But even on the cliffs at the water's edge, there is quite a lot to discover. The microcosm of this pool seems to be in order. The regular tidal exchange of water provides crabs and algae with a protected habitat in a rocky biotope. The lagoon is formed by a promontory of the mainland and the Valdez Peninsula. This is why the Golfo Nuevo is roughly 4 degrees warmer than the adjacent sea. The promontory also protects it from the high waves of the South Atlantic beyond the 40th parallel. This region is not known to seafarers as the Roaring Forties for nothing, apart from being regarded as the forecourt to the hell of Cape Horn. During a storm, even in the Golfo Nuevo, waves can be as high as 4 to 6 meters. When one sees with which vehemence the waves thrash the mainland, it is easy to imagine why everyone who has something to do with the sea fears the power of this force of nature. The tidal range, in other words, the difference between high and low water in the Golfo Nuevo, is 6 meters. This makes it difficult to moor boats at a berth. The beach runs far into the bay too, so that at low tide several hundred meters have to be overcome until one reaches deep water. This is why a special technique is employed when putting boats to water. However, the real attraction of this region lives in the open water. The Golfo Nuevo is world famous as a nursery for right whales. Nowhere else in the world is whale watching so impressive as it is here. Whales come into the immediate vicinity of the boat. When they surface, one has the feeling as if they are observing humans and not the other way round. It appears to be a question of perspectives. Who is curious of whom? Whatever the answer, a trip on a whale-watching boat is definitely a natural experience which changes the awareness of one and all. Around 100,000 visitors come to Pyramides annually to see the whales. Boats full of tourists take to the sea several times a day. The French oceanographer Jacques Cousteau described the lives of whales in the Golfo Nuevo for the first time in 1974. He founded, albeit unwittingly, present-day whale watching, thereby laying the foundation for the protection of whales in the region at an early stage. Today it is clear that living animals such as whales, seals or elephant seals are important economic factors of the region. They attract those who wish to experience unique natural spectacles. Whale watching undoubtedly belongs to the most impressive experiences that modern city dwellers can enjoy. Thus, the animals become an economic factor and their protection becomes a personal concern of the inhabitants of Golfo Nuevo. This wasn't always the case. Even the English term for these whales reflects the attitude of man in regard to the mammals in the past century. British and American whalers called them southern right whales, meaning the right whale of the south. The name referred to the hunt of the on average 17 to 20 meter long animals, which can also weigh up to 65 tons. They are considered to be sluggish and ordinarily swim close to the surface. Right whales have a blubber layer of some 40 centimeters, more than any of their relatives. This is why a whale, when killed, floats on the surface and doesn't sink like most of his counterparts to the seabed. They are easy and, of course, rich prey for the whalers, as several hundred barrels of lamp oil can be boiled from the fat of the huge mammals. This is a thing of the past since 1987. Since then, whales are protected and whaling is prohibited. Right whales eat between 2 and 2.5 tons of krill daily. To do this, right whales dive to depths of up to 600 meters. An average dive can last anywhere between 8 and 12 minutes. Thereby, they filter the water with their mouths open. Krill and plankton stick to the baleen plates of the whales' mouths and are then swallowed. Therefore, this footage of a whale during a hunt has rarity value. One can see well how he sucks the water into his open mouth. Due to the undertow, a small vortex results immediately in front of the baleen plates, which then catapults the krill between them. A right whale rarely hunts close to the surface. He only does so when he finds more food there, as in his preferred hunting grounds. This process is known as upwelling. It usually occurs at full moon periods. Whales are especially protected in the Golfo Nuevo. Even bathing in the Gulf is prohibited during the months of August to January. Only scientists and a camera team can acquire a permit just once a year, enabling them to dive with the whales. We succeeded in doing so, and can therefore present such unique footage of a dive with whales for the very first time in 3D. About 1,500 right whales spend the spring and the summer of the southern hemisphere in the lagoon of the Golfo Nuevo. Most of these are females. After a 13-month pregnancy, they give birth in the bay, which at 6 degrees water temperature is relatively warm for the region. Shortly after birth, the calves are between 4 to 5 meters long and weigh around 4 tons. The calves remain for a year with their mother, where they are suckled and rarely move more than a body length away from her. After a year, they reach a size of around 9 meters. Only then are they weaned. In mid-October, the bulls join the huge group of cows. Due to the long pregnancies and rearing periods of the calves, at least 2, but mostly 3 years lie between the individual litters. For this reason, only a third of the cows in Golfo Nuevo are willing. This results in a competitive situation in which several bulls often court a single cow. The cows now have options and attempt to delay mating by either swimming away from the aroused bull or by lying on their sides and waving with their fins, the so-called flippers. The courtship of the bulls is brutal. They try to crowd their competitors out with their entire body mass, often creating huge swells in the water in doing so. Despite the cold water, a whale's body can often overheat during lovemaking. They cool down the blood circulation by stretching their fluke out of the water for several minutes. This works well, as the fluke is the only body part of the whale that isn't protected by thick layers of fat. Similar to the backs of human hands, veins run just beneath the skin of the fluke. When the fluke dries in the air, evaporative cooling takes place and the body temperature of the whale cools down via the fluke. The stocks of right whales in the southern hemisphere are rising again. At the present time, approximately 10,000 animals have been counted. Estimates are based on an annual growth rate of 7%. Nonetheless, right whales are still endangered, which is in the nature of things. Whales don't become sexually mature until they reach the age of 9. Cows only give birth every 3 years. This makes every dead whale a catastrophe for the species. This is why a note from Captain Fitzroy in the logbook of the Beagle belongs to one of the most remarkable, considering it was made at a time in which no one even considered the protection of species or hunting bans. Back then, Roy wrote, "Whales are among the most fascinating creatures on this planet. One thing is as valid today as it was yesterday. If one visits the silent giants of the seas, one returns changed." This statement can also be found in the logbook of the Beagle. The Gulf of Corcovado. The bay next to Pyramidas is home to the mussel divers of Valdez. They dive for scallops in a very special way. A bay adjacent to the Bay of Pyramidas, a deserted beach, a small estancia, or ranch, an old bus, refuse and litter everywhere. When approaching the buildings, it is hard to believe that anyone lives here. But Jorge lives here with his wife and his brothers. Jorge has worked in his profession for the past 20 years. He goes to sea in the morning and returns with his catch in the early afternoon. Jorge and his men have unloaded a catch of about 2 tons on this day. Money which is also urgently needed. The tractor which pulls the boat and now the pallet is in urgent need of an overhaul. A wholesaler from Port Madryn, closest larger town outside of the nature reserve, pays just below $2 per kilo for the scallops. Jorge is eager to show us how he dives for the mussels. The boat takes our crew on board and makes another trip to the mussel beds. We promise not to use our cameras during the journey, as the mussel banks are the 35-year-old fisherman's trade secret. In a depth of some 20 meters, Jorge collects the coveted mussels at lightning speed in a net. A 20-meter-long garden hose, which is connected to an air compressor on board, supplies him with the air to breathe. Net after net is transported to the surface. On board, the mussels are sorted and provisionally stored in boxes. The boat returns 4 hours later. Crates are unloaded once more and transported by Jorge to the collection point of the wholesaler behind the estancia. When the mussels spring open, it is a sign of freshness. We're looking forward to this evening because fresh scallops are on the menu, which our cameraman brought with him from the dive. The proprietor of the local restaurant has agreed to prepare the scallops for us.
Primero vamos a poner vino blanco.
His chef explains how it is best done and, incidentally, reveals a secret Patagonian recipe for scallops au gratin.
Un poco de aceite de oliva. Perfecto. Vamos a poner un poquito de sal, no mucho porque el queso es bastante saladito. Un toque. Vamos. Vamos al grill para que se gratine. Vamos a poner un poquito del juguito este que es como fantástico.
They could hardly be fresher than this, and so we helped ourselves remorselessly.
Para venir a disfrutarlas.
Next on our itinerary are the sea lions in the Golfo Nuevo. They live in reduplication colonies beyond the endless stream of tourist boats at the western exit of the Gulf. The trip along the coast takes around an hour. Then the animals announce their presence. The colony comprises roughly 1,000 animals, making it one of the smaller sea lion colonies in Patagonia. Until the end of the past century, sea lions were hunted on a grand scale. Millions of the animals in the southern hemisphere were almost completely wiped out. Pelts and fish oil ensured huge profits for the sea lion hunters. Some of these killed up to 50,000 in one season. Stocks were virtually on the verge of collapse. Today, the sea lion population has recovered. Nowadays, around 250,000 sea lions live off the coasts of Patagonia, while the population continues to expand. Sea lions only live in colonies during the mating season. Bulls arrive in the colonies prior to the females and secure their places. The curious animals are not afraid of humans, and even when our cameraman went into the water, they just nosily observed what was going on. The bravest of the lively animals come to within 20 centimeters of our camera and play with our cameraman. Sea lions are good hunters. They feed on everything that happens to swim in the water and fits into their mouths. Small sharks and squids are at the top of their menus. It's not quite as peaceful on land, however. Warily, the sea lion bulls defend their territory. All of the cows within this area belong to the respective bull. The strongest of them sits in the center of the colony. Should a female approach a territorial boundary, she is immediately turned away by a bull, much to the disdain of the bull presiding over the neighboring area. Vehement clashes and bite wounds are the result of territorial disputes in which the bulls are constantly involved. As this is energy and condition sapping, only very few bulls manage to successfully defend a harem for longer than 2 seasons. We leave the sea lion colony. Our journey in the footsteps of Charles Darwin now takes us further south. It is about 500 kilometers to the next stage of our quest. Skirting the northern foothills of the vast oil fields of the Golfo San Jorge, our route takes us to the Cabo dos Bahias, Cape with the 2 coasts. It is here that we want to pay the Magellanic penguin colony a visit and hope to encounter guanacos and the rare Darwin's rhea. Arrival in Camarones. The town is the capital of the Departamento Florentino Ameghino, with a population of around 1,100, a hotel and 2 restaurants, of which one is closed for most of the year. Camarones is also the self-proclaimed capital of white coalfish, a fish that only occurs here and in southern Chile. Generously, the inhabitants of Camarones erected a monument to the fish in the center of town. Another 20 kilometers southwest along dirt roads, and we reach the Reservado dos Bahias. The further one travels south, the hillier the landscape becomes. The red rocks are characteristic of the region. The vegetation is lush and taller. Now, in the early summer, several rivers still flow, but in 2 months at the latest, here too, drought and the continually blowing wind will eventually dry out the riverbeds. Here we encounter our first guanacos. 1 meter 20 to 2 meters 20 tall, these animals belong to the cloven-hoofed species. Although scientifically controversial, they're considered to be the ancestors of llamas and alpacas. This is how Charles Darwin described the animals in his travel records. In the plains of Patagonia, we have seen more guanacos than anywhere else in South America. As a rule, they live in small herds of around 15 animals. Guanacos are extremely timid. They run away, even if the distance appears huge. We're in luck and can get relatively close to the animals. One animal is always on guard duty. A smacking sound issued by the guard is enough, and the herd flees from the supposed enemy. Adults weigh between 100 and 120 kilograms and feed primarily on grass. Guanacos are mainly found in South America and live in wide grass steppes in heights of up to 4,000 meters. We arrive in the Cape region. Here too, the vegetation has changed in contrast to that of the Valdez Peninsula. The shrubs are taller, and one has the feeling that everything is much greener here. With the arrival of the Spanish in South America, there were an estimated 50 million wild guanacos. Ever since, they have been hunted for their fur, but even more so in order to provide pastures for sheep. Due to the mass killing, stocks reduced drastically. Today, there are around 600,000 guanacos, constituting little more than 1% of their original number. The penguin colony at Cabo das Bahias. Around 20 to 30,000 Magellanic penguins call this their home. Magellanic penguins derive their name from the frequency of their distribution along the coasts of the Terra Magellanica. The expansion corresponds roughly to present-day Patagonia. Around 650,000 breeding pairs of the 70-centimeter-tall Magellanic penguins come to the coasts of Patagonia between September and February to mate and raise their young. As a rule, Magellanic penguins lay 2 eggs, but usually only raise 1 animal. This type of selection guarantees the couple offspring should, for example, the first fall victim to a nest robber. Laying of the 2 approximately 125-gram eggs occurs primarily in burrows, which the penguins have dug out beforehand. The incubation period lasts around 40 days. The females begin with the brood, while the males travel distances of up to 500 kilometers to hunt for food. He takes over from the female after 15 to 20 days. Magellanic penguins are sociable. Especially during the breeding period, they huddle close together. It's no wonder that neighborhood disputes sometimes arise. Skuas and skunks are the natural enemies of the clutch at the Cabo dos Bahias. They wait patiently from a safe distance, then steal the eggs at lightning speed from the nests of the penguins. As long as other animals remain far enough away from the breeding burrows of the Magellanic penguins, no other dangers lurk. Threatening postures on behalf of the penguins are usually enough to keep predators at bay, as their sharp beaks can cause considerable injury. Should another animal come too close, the penguins cock their heads. This should be taken seriously, as penguins only look friendly. They can get very angry indeed, and then things can become quite uncomfortable. A rare guest in the colony is this Darwin's rhea. The timid creatures are very rarely seen. This one parades proudly through the penguin colony, even though he too maintains a respectful distance between himself and the breeding burrows. Penguin relationships are usually long-lasting. When partners meet each other in the colony, they recognize each other via the call of the male penguin. Each animal has a unique call, which lasts until the couple find each other. Magellanic penguins enjoy a loving partnership with their mates. They can often be seen huddling up to one another, dozing in the sunshine, or cleaning each other's plumage. It's now half-time on our journey tracing the footsteps of Charles Darwin. We've seen how the coexistence of animals functions according to empirical rules, just as Charles Darwin observed and described. We still haven't been able to decipher the secrets of Patagonia, but for a brief period we were able to immerse into the infinite vastness of the land and the beauty of its nature. And this is what we have in store in the second part of our journey in the footsteps of Charles Darwin, testimony to a bygone era. The Penguin Island before the mouth of the Rio Deseado. 30 years ago, penguins and seals were mercilessly slaughtered here. Darwin's Rock. Here is where the naturalist developed substantial parts of his theory of evolution. Experience all of this and more in the second part of In the Footsteps of Charles Darwin.